Intrepid Studios' Ashes of Creation launched their Kickstarter around 7 years ago and are planning to finally release a second and, well, hopefully this time somewhat proper playable alpha test later this year, which will also be persistent. So, you know, many see this as a form of early access release in a way anyways. But I'm very skeptical. And I'm not even skeptical because of their shady Battle Royale monetization 5 years ago, or how ArcheAge players who play with him said he was a giga whale, which might also be a good thing, or how the lead game designer just left a couple of years ago, seemingly out of nowhere, or how Steven allegedly used to scam people with some weird fruit juice MLM company. This sounds like a script for a new South Park episode. And to be honest, I don't really care about any of these things as long as the game is good. And that's kind of where the problems come in. I've been following this game for a while. Well, basically since the Kickstarter came out. I also played the Apocalypse Battle Royale mode. And at one point I was so invested in it that I was even asking questions on their live streams.
And our question from Nico Too Low wants to know, can tab targeted abilities be augmented to become action and combat abilities and vice versa?
But nowadays, the more development time has gone on, the less optimistic I am for the game. And I wanted to showcase that to you guys today. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the node system, which is kind of the foundation of the entire premise of Ashes of Creation. Having nodes across the entire world that change depending on player behavior. Players have a little bit of control how to even set up the cities, and also every node level and every server will have basically different content because every node has different quest lines, maybe even different bosses, different dungeons, different events showing up. And just from talking about this, you might realize, wait, that's a lot of stuff. That's crazy if a studio, especially a small studio, wants to make 85 nodes that all have different stages, all have different, you know, towns, quest lines, stories, dungeons, whatever it is, right? That alone is crazy. And in the most recent showcase, they kind of tried to show it off a little bit, although that didn't really help their case a whole lot. Basically what we saw in the showcase was them saying, oh, this is what happens when the node upgrades, and there's this dark cloud, and that's it.
The location. Oh, the node is there. Okay. Wow, look at this view. Oh my god, what is this?
So yeah, when nodes level up, they will create new content. New story arcs will start, and story arcs are very big, like big area-changing things that can happen.
Right, well, like we saw with Carfin.
Like we saw with Carfin. This is one for Oakenbane.
Okay, thank you for showing how it will look like when a node upgrades, but why did they not walk into the thing that changed, or why did they not really showcase what's happening? And because they probably don't have anything beyond that. It kind of ties into the whole theater play they always do when they have a showcase, although it seems like this unscripted guys just having fun with the game. That's not really what it is. It feels more like they have a very specific idea of the showcase, go into it, and just have this theater set up, this little scene, if you will, where they just walk around in it and just showcase the things that they want to. That doesn't necessarily mean that is part of a functioning game already, which it obviously isn't. But yeah, so the node system is absolute insanity, and actually one of the systems that I was so excited about when I got into the game, because this makes it very unique. Every time you play the game and every server you're on feels unique. And as you can see here, they have 85 regular node locations on launch with 15 additional castle nodes, which is a lot of work, and there's so much to be done here. Now, can a normal indie studio create so much content? No, I don't think so, first of all. So first of all, the scope of what they're setting themselves up to do is very unreasonable. And by the time this comes out, I don't know if they even have half of these properly set up, because we haven't seen a single one of them properly made yet. And that's kind of the the name of the game here. The problem overall is I feel like they have a lot of great ideas, a lot of great theories about how these things should work, but in reality they didn't pull through on any of these concepts yet. They're all barely functioning or not functioning like at all, right? And there's different node types: divine nodes, economic nodes, military nodes, scientific nodes, which also change the way you even elect your mayor of that node, or the guild that's controlling it, or the person that's controlling it. There's a lot of like depth to the system, and there's so much depth even to the system that I think they just can't pull through at all. Especially after 7 years or probably more development time, they still don't have a single functioning node that they showcase, right? They basically just have these little console commands that they put in where the node upgrades, but we don't even know if it changed even the slightest thing. So that is the first point. The node system is incredibly complex and in-depth, and I just do not believe that they can pull through with this. The same kind of goes for the classes, which the classes are also absolute insanity. They're kind of inspired by how ArcAge did classes a little bit, where you have a combination of two that creates like a new name for the class. But you have a base class, so maybe we should explain that first. So on the left side here you can see the primary class. So a bard, a cleric, a fighter, a mage, a ranger, a rogue, a summoner, and a tank. By the way, most of these classes we've not even really seen. We've seen some of the fighter, I believe, a long time ago. We've seen a little bit of the mage, which is also feels like not very well put together yet. The ranger we've seen pretty recently, and we've seen a little bit of the cleric as well, and I think small amounts of rogue and tank as well. But none of these, okay, I mean, not a single one of these base classes is fully fledged out yet, or even close to it. So they don't even have the foundation for the classes yet. They have an idea what they want to do, or what the classes are supposed to have, or what attributes or little niches, or you know, these classes should have, but they haven't really put that into the game yet, as far as we know anyways. And that's only the first part of the puzzle, because the foundation of these classes is actually a very small part of the equation, at least in Ashes of Creation. But the way that it works, you pick a primary class, and alongside it, I think at level 25, you can pick a secondary class. What does that mean? So for example, if you play a bard, and then you get a fighter secondary, you're no longer a bard, you're then a Tellsword. Sounds cool. All of these names sound cool, by the way. And it also has a very cool interaction, because what happens is you augment your existing primary class abilities with your secondary class like type. And there's a bunch of different augmentations. And for example, I think I read mage has, for example, can elemental augment some abilities, or teleport augment some abilities. So instead of running to the target, you teleport to the target. There's a lot of depth in that again. But that's not even everything. First of all, just having this many options is crazy, right? Having this many augmentations, which, well, in this case, for one primary class would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different class augmentations, which in itself also have different augmentations. I think for the example of the mage, they said that it has like 4 or more per ability or something like that, which is absolutely crazy. And you want to do that for all of these? That's going to take forever, and it's going to take even longer if you don't even have the primary classes set up yet. You don't even have the foundation for that yet, but it gets even crazier. But there's different schools of augmentation. So this was the secondary type that I just talked about. I think there's a little bit about the mage too. Maybe there's a little bit here. Choosing life augment will provide self-healing benefits as well as limited life-giving benefits to other players. So just as an example, outside of the mage, here was the mage one, will offer 4 magic schools of augmentation, such as teleportation, fire, frost, and lightning. So that's already pretty in-depth, but it gets crazier. There's also religions, which we don't really know a whole lot about in Ashes of Creation, but those also augment your abilities, your primary abilities. To what extent, we don't know that. Again, like, this entire system is barely even touched on, but there's even more. And that's not all. obviously there's more. So there also are racial augments. So depending on which race you picked, that can also augment your primary archetype's abilities. There's a lot. There's a lot of builds, and I'm excited for that. I love that shit, right? I love making builds, and I especially love making builds in MMOs. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But how can this even be even remotely close of being a functioning game if they don't even have the baseline yet after 7 years? My question here is, how much longer do we have to wait? Now, a lot of these questions will probably be answered by the time we get the Alpha 2 in a couple of months, but I do not see this being like a functioning game for a couple of years, maybe another 7. And we haven't even talked about the combat system yet, right? Like at this point, this is just theory crafting, talent trees, and ability augmentation, right? We haven't even talked about how outdated the combat system already looks. I don't know how it feels, and I don't know if that's just a symptom of Steven playing the classes, but for the most part, and especially recently where he's playing a lot of the mage, it looks very outdated. And the next point that I wanted to talk about is a little bit of the kind of people who will be testing the game. So obviously we know about the Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter was going for, well, a couple of months, and that was back in 2017. And a lot of people spent a lot of money on this. So just as an average, there's $3.2 million that were put into the game, and there's around 19,500 backers at that time. So just to give you an idea, the average Ashes of Creation backer has spent $160 on the game, and that was 7 years ago. So obviously these are people that are already very invested into the game, not only time-wise, but also money-wise, right? Spending $160 on average on a game that quite literally doesn't exist is crazy, okay? But it goes further than that. I don't know if you guys remember this, but for a long time, for many years, they had these little monthly pre-order packages where you can kind of buy yourself into the tests, and you get some cosmetics with it, you get some game time with it, and whatever. These are not available anymore, which is I think a good thing, because all they basically did was baiting FOMO. So because they were limited time skins, and you know, it is what it is. But what I'm trying to say is a lot of those packages, if you wanted to play the Alpha 2, for example, the recent one, the recent package, was $250 to get into the upcoming Alpha 2 test. What kind of culture does something like that create? You can just go to the YouTube comments of any Ashes of Creation video right now, and even to the forums to an extent, that they've created for themselves an echo chamber, a bubble of feedback that doesn't really represent reality. And if most of your playtesters will be people who spend $250 or more, then you are creating an environment of people who have sunk in a lot of time, because they've probably followed the game for a long time, and people who've spent a lot of money into your game. What does that create? That creates the sunken cost fallacy, where they're like, oh, we need to keep going now, we need to keep I've invested a lot into this game, it needs to be good, and a lot of people become very biased in such a situation, so they can't really give you very realistic feedback. So my question here is, do you want realistic feedback? Do you want honest feedback? Or do you want yes people, yes men in your community that just say, this is the best thing ever, who's like, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and we love this game and everything about it, the new stone and the new tree that he showed us are absolutely outstanding? Is that the kind of culture that you want? Probably not. And is that the kind of culture that fosters a good game? Also probably not. And we also need to talk about novelty, because I think exploration and new things to discover is really important. And obviously for a game that will start their open testing in Alpha 2, there will be very little of it. And that goes even beyond that. At the end of their live streams, they always show some small things about the game. Like in this case, I don't know, a drum and some music instruments or some gear sets. What I'm trying to say is, by the time this game actually fully releases, every single little speck, every stone, every grass, every tree will already be completely figured out and known. And I think that is a very harmful thing, for especially an MMORPG. Although that being said, I completely understand as an indie studio that you want to keep, you know, the interest going over long periods of time, because these things take a long time. But I will also say Ashes of Creation is taking much, and I mean much longer than most MMOs have in the past. Especially considering that they're probably not even halfway to their finish line. So I'm really concerned about how much fun it's really gonna be to explore the game if you're not spending $250 for an Alpha 2 package or something like that. Because by the time, you know, the actual release happens, everything seems to be already figured out probably. And we didn't even talk about the recent Caravan video, where a lot of the systems seem to be not very well thought through and only basically made on a surface level, not really considering you know, how these systems will actually be used by the players. That's obviously a completely different layer on top of all of the work they already have to do, which is also super difficult. And even the, you know, the biggest companies in the world struggle with understanding how players will interact with systems in the game, right? So we're not even close to that point yet, and well, I hope we get there fast, but at the moment it's not really looking like it. So what's the point of this video? I'm actually someone who really likes Ashes of Creation in theory. I think what they have on paper, and even graphically, a lot of people complain about Ashes looking outdated graphically already with Unreal Engine. I don't really care about that. I think it looks good enough. And I love what they're trying to do with the node system. I love what they're trying to do with the class augmentation stuff. I don't like the combat, but I mean, that's besides the point. I think they have a very interesting blueprint for the game. But that's kind of where it ends right now, because everything I'm watching, or I've been watching for the past 7 years, seems to not really deliver on what they're trying to do yet. And that's basically my biggest concern. And I would really implore everyone who is already a part of the Ashes community and who is already very invested in the game to keep a critical mind on the game and keep giving them actual constructive criticism instead of just saying, oh, it's terrible, or oh, this is the best game ever made, right? That's probably the most important point here. I hope that this game's gonna pop off, and I wouldn't have followed it for 7 years if I didn't. But again, I think as of right now, the game has very little, if anything, to show for, and also very little, if anything, to compete with other current MMOs. With that being said, I hope Ashes pulls through. I hope that I don't have to be skeptical anymore in the future. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone playing Alpha 2, although I will probably not be a part of that just yet. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope Ashes will, you know, prove me wrong, and they have a lot more than they show. I really hope so. But as of right now, that's probably not the case. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. Have a nice rest of your weekend, and I'll see you soon. Peace.